Hello and welcome back to MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things Magic. In our video today, we are going to unbox, reveal, discuss, and upgrade the contents of the Painbow pre-constructed commander deck from Dominaria United. Greetings and salutations to the MTGBC. You are the MTG Burgeoning community. We are just moments away from revealing the contents of Magic's second ever 5-color pre-constructed commander deck. This one is called Painbow. And let's get it on. The seal is off. It's gone. There it goes. No more seal. And now the contents will spill forth like so much anticipation for this deck. There's our deck box. There's Jared. Deck box looks like it's in pretty decent condition. I'm going to slide that out. That goes into the recycling pile, of course. We have our punch-outs right there. Ooh, we have some off-centered punch-outs. Ooh, that doesn't look very appealing. Oh man, that's okay. We got tons of those as long as that sweet, sweet divider is still okay. And there it is. We're going to liberate that from its cardboard dungeon. I'm going to slide that bad boy right there. Now we're going to open up our quote-unquote deck box. We're going to pour out the contents. I'm going to put our deck box right there. Let's see, what do we have here? We have some more packaging, which will get recycled. We have our life wheel. We have our let's learn how to play Magic and Commander. We have the sweet, sweet deck. And then we have our collector booster sample pack that will be saved for something better. All right, let's liberate the cards from this oppressive plastic wrapper, and let's take a look at the 2 commander options that we could utilize for this 5-color WooBurg Matters deck. All right, the first, of course, our front-facing commander option is Jared Carthalion. It is a Planeswalker. It is our first ever playable 5-color Planeswalker outside of any unformats. Jared is going to ETB with 5 loyalty counters. We can +1 to create a 3/3 Kavoo creature token. That's all colors. We can -3 Jared, and we can choose up to 2 target creatures, and for each of them, we put a number of +1/+1 counters on it equal to the number of colors it is. And lastly, -6, we can return target multicolored card from our graveyard to our hand. If that card was all colors, we draw a card and create 2 treasure tokens. The best part about Jared, I'm thinking, is if we've got some WooBurg creatures on our side of the battlefield, throwing 5 +1/+1 counters on 2 of them each time we take 3 counters off, seems like it could be a pathway to victory. So moving forward in this video, we are going to consider Jared Carthalion as the primary commander of this Painbow deck. The secondary option is Jensen Carthalion Druid Exile, a 2/2 legendary human druid for Selesnya colors. Whenever we cast a multicolored spell, we get to scry 1. If that spell was all colors, then we create a Sarah Angel, which is a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying and vigilance. We can pay a generic 5 into Jensen and tap him to add WooBurg to our mana pool, which is a great way to fix our mana so that we can cast and activate all of our WooBurg spells and effects. For the purposes of this video moving forward, we're going to consider that Jensen Carthalion is going to be in the 99. In addition to Jared Carthalion, the front-facing commander of this deck, and Jensen Carthalion, the secondary option, both of which are new to the Magic catalog and unique to the Painbow deck, there are 8 other brand new to Magic cards, and we're going to review each one of them now. The first is Two-Headed Hellkite, a 5/5 dragon with flying, menace, and haste for 1 in WooBurg colors. Whenever Two-Headed Hellkite attacks, we draw 2 cards. This can hit the battlefield running and attack the moment it comes into play, and the fact that it has both flying and menace means that it should survive nearly all of its attacks because it needs 2 creatures to block it, and they both must be flying and or reachers. So Two-Headed Hellkite should be able to swing in for 5 points of damage minimally each time, and put 2 cards into our hand every time we declare it as an attacker. Next up, we have Tiller Engine. It's an artifact construct creature. It's 1/3 for 2 generic mana, and whenever a land ETB is under our control tapped, we may choose one. Either we untap that land, or we can tap target non-land permanent on opponent controls. As you'll see later in this video, there are quite a number of lands that enter the battlefield tapped in this build, and Tiller Engine will act as a way in which to untap those lands so that we're not forced to lose tempo. Next up, we have Unite the Coalition. Instant speed for 2 and Wooburg mana. We may choose 5, and we may choose any of the following modes more than once. Target permanent phases out. Target player draws a card. We exile target player's graveyard. Unite the Coalition deals 2 damage to any target. Or we destroy target artifact or enchantment. Review those 5 modes very, very carefully before you begin to dismiss Unite the Coalition's power. Every one of these modes are relevant. Protection in the form of phasing, card draw, which is extraordinarily important, removing a player's graveyard from play, dealing 2 points of damage to any target, utility creatures, commanders, planeswalkers, or just straight to the face, and destroying target artifact or enchantment. And we get to pick any combination of those modes, all at instant speed for just the investment of 7 total mana. Unite the Coalition is one of those cards that I believe will creep up in value over time once the community catches up to its power. Next card, it is Philaji Wayfarer, a human scout for 2 and a green mana. It is all colors, but it does not affect its color identity. So its color identity is green, but it is considered to have all colors. It's a 2/4, and multicolored spells we have Convoke. That means that our creatures can help cast those spells. Each creature we tap while casting a multicolored spell pays for 1 generic mana or 1 mana of that color of whatever the creature is. So with enough Wooburg creatures or creatures that have 5 colors on our side of the battlefield, we can tap those creatures to act as mana for casting our Wooburg spells. Next, we have Iridium Maelstrom, sorcery speed for Wooburg mana. Destroy each creature that isn't all colors. This is probably the most flavorful removal spell we could ask for in this Wooburg Matters deck. We are sculpting an entire build to take advantage of creatures that are all 5 colors. Iridium Maelstrom will reward us with that by not destroying our creatures while destroying all of our opponents, as long as they are not all 5 colors. Next up, and a very welcomed win condition for any builds out there that were flavorful enough to go all Wooburg all the time, we have Mana Cannons, an enchantment for 2 and a red mana. Whenever we cast a multicolored spell, Mana Cannons deals X damage to any target, where X is the number of colors that spell is. So if we're looking to cast Wooburg spell after Wooburg spell, Mana Cannons is going to throw around 5 points of damage every time we do so, like nobody's business. All right, next up, and boy do we have a doozy to talk about here, it's Primeval Spawn, a 10/10 avatar for 5 and Wooburg mana. It has Vigilance, Trample, and Lifelink. However, if Primeval Spawn would enter the battlefield and it wasn't cast, or no mana was spent to cast it, it's exiled instead, so it never sees the battlefield unless we cast it with mana. Keep that in mind for later on in this video. When Primeval Spawn leaves the battlefield, we exile the top 10 cards of our library. We may cast any number of spells with total mana value 10 or less from among them without paying their mana costs. Study Primeval Spawn's text very, very carefully. It does not have to die for its trigger to happen. It can be exiled, it could be bounced, it could be blinked. As long as it just leaves the battlefield, we're looking at the top 10 cards of our library library, and we're going to cast any number of those with mana value with total mana value 10 or less without paying their mana costs. And let's face it, our opponents are going to have to deal with Primeval Spawn. A 10/10 with Vigilance, Lifelink, and Trample should not be long for the battlefield. So more than anything else, this is going to be an investment over time, and hopefully it's time that our opponents will run out of. And the last new card in the Painbow constructed deck, it is Obsidian Obelisk. It's an artifact for a generic mana cost of 2. It ETBs tapped. It taps for a colorless mana, and it taps to add 1 mana of any color that can only be spent to cast a multicolored spell. I am feeling the same way you are. If this artifact did not enter the battlefield tapped, it may be instantly one of the best mana rocks to be in the Commander format, but it isn't, it doesn't, so it won't. In addition to the 10 brand new to Magic cards that we've already showcased here during this video, there's also a slew of reprints in this Painbow pre-constructed deck, and we're going to zip through all of them right now. Now, with that being said, as we go through the non-land reprints, we're going to put them into 2 different piles. One pile will be a WooBurg-specific pile, and the other one will not be. By doing so, through the purposes of clarity, you can have a better idea of how dedicated the WooBurg theme is in the 99 of this build. We'll begin with Abzan Charm. We have a charm. We're going to see some more charms as we move through. Beast Within, fantastic removal spell. Explosive Vegetation, another Felwar Stone. We're never going to tire of Felwar Stone reprints. Fusion Elemental is our first WooBurg specific card to show from the reprints. Migration Path. We have a Naya Charm. Path to Exile, never tire of getting that. We have Path to the World Tree. That's going to go right in our WooBurg pile. Sultai Charm. We have Sylvan Reclamation. Transguild Courier, although it's not WooBurg in the casting cost, it is all colors, so it does have the WooBurg synergies that we're looking for. Next up, we have our Chelos Lagoon Mystic. This will help to have our permanents come into play untapped, which will be very important when we start talking about the land base. Baleful Strix draws us a card and has Death Touch. Coalition Relic helps to speed up our mana. Dune Blast, we have Feyburrow Elder. Now, it's not WooBurg in the cost, and it doesn't automatically give us WooBurg mana, but if we have each color of permanence under our control, this will tap for WooBurg mana, so it is going to be added to our WooBurg specific pile. Hero of Precinct 1 is multicolored spell dependent, but not necessarily WooBurg dependent, so we will not include that in our pile. Knight of New Alara is absolutely going to give us some WooBurg boosts because each one of our WooBurg creatures will get +5/+5, and that's just going to be a potential win condition. Actually, let's shift Hero of Precinct 1 over to the WooBurg specific pile because it does have some interaction. Lavalanche for some more removal, Merciless Eviction, Painful Truths for some card draw. Radiant Flames is going to deal X damage to each creature, where X is the number of colors of mana spent to cast the spell. So the best that we can do is 3 mana to each creature, which is not necessarily WooBurg related, so that will go to the non-WooBurg pile. Selvala will not help us very much with our WooBurg spells and effects. Solemn Simulacrum, we have Time Wipe, that's a nice reprint in this deck. Glint Eye Nephilim, we have Atla Palani, we have Maelstrom Nexus, is WooBurg specific, and so is Chromanticore, both for its bestow mechanic and as its actual creature. And there's Okagachi making an appearance, its first ever reprinting from the very first 5-color pre-constructed EDH deck, which was the dragon deck that has the Dragon. I believe that was referred to as, that was called the Draconic Domination, I think that was called. Zaxara the Exemplary. Okay, this one is a problem for me here. I know that we're trying to make sure that we can fix and ramp up the mana base as best as we can, but Zaxara is not the best for this deck because if we were to use if we were to use mana to cast any X spells, we would create this additional Hydra creature token. There are no X spells in this build. So really, for the purposes of including Zaxara, its first ever reprint, for the purposes of this deck, it's just a 2/3 Death Toucher that can tap to add 2 mana of any one color. Again, we're in a 5-color build. We don't want 2 mana of any one color. We want 2 mana of 2 different colors. Zaxara feels forced in this build, and I don't like it. All right, next up, Illuna. We have a Maelstrom Archangel. That's a fantastic addition. If it hits for combat damage, we get to cast a spell from our hand without paying its mana cost, and it's on flavor with the Wooburg. Nethroi, we have Rien. All right, now Rien could help with the Wooburg because it gives the +1/+0 power boost. And when one of our Wooburg creatures dies, we do get to return it to our hand, so we will put that in our Wooburg specific pile. Surrak Dragonclaw. We have Xeris, again with some instant and sorcery spells. We have Abundant Growth. There's our Arcane Signet. Oh, and a nice little note here. No Soul Ring in this deck. You did not hear that. That is not a typo. That is not a misspeak. There is no Soul Ring in this Painbow deck. Coiling Oracle, Cultivate, Echoing Truth. We have Explore. We have Farseek, Commander Sphere, Growth Spiral, Kodama's Reach, Terminate, Prophetic Prism, Search for Tomorrow. So from a Wooburg perspective, for dedicated Wooburg builds, aside from the 10 new cards we've already showcased, these are the reprints that are Wooburg specific. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Only 11. There are only 11 Wooburg specific or Wooburg synergistic cards from a reprint perspective to match up with the 10 brand new cards. Now let's review the land base in this 5-color pre-constructed deck, starting with our basic lands. We're going to have 2 basic plains, we're going to have 2 basic islands, 2 basic swamps, 2 basic mountains, and for the purposes of asymmetry, 3 basic forests. I sense perhaps 1 extra basic forest as a way in which to help cast all of our mana ramp spells like Cultivate, Kodama's Reach, and other spells that can put lands onto our side of the battlefield. Speaking of getting lands onto our side of the battlefield, for the purposes of getting some of those basics onto our side of the battlefield, we have an Evolving Wild and a Terramorphic Expanse, in addition to a Krosan Verge. Now, the Krosan Verge is not going to get any basic lands that we want. It's going to allow it to get a forest card or a plains card. Now, for the purposes of fetching, it should be noted that they do not have to be basic plains or basic forests, but it is important to realize that it can't get any of the colors that we need from the basic lands, but you'll see very soon that that could be an advantageous card to keep in the 99 of this build. Giving us colors, giving us any of the colors we need, of course, is the best land in the format. Command Tower taps for 1 mana of any color that we need to cast our spells. Exotic Orchard, with the right number of players and colors that are at the table, should act like Command Tower 2.0. We also have a Crystal Quarry, which we can jam 5 generic mana into and tap it to give us the Wooburg colors that we need. In addition, Cascading Cataracts, a fantastic reprint here, does a little bit differently than what Crystal Quarry does. It taps for any combination of colors. Again, most likely we're going to have each of that being the Wooburg mana. And as a bonus, Cascading Cataracts is indestructible. A land that seemingly does not fit very well in this build, Murmuring Bosk. Okay, it says it counts as a forest. It will enter the battlefield tapped unless we reveal a Tree Folk card from our hand. How many Tree Folk were in this build? You let me know in the comment section below. So it's going to come into play most likely tapped. It's going to tap for a white or a black and deal 1 point of damage to us. There are many, many options that could replace Murmuring Bosk in a 5-color build, and honestly, this would be one of the very first lands I would replace. Next up, and some synergy with Krosan Verge, In the land base of this build, they have each of the 5 Battle for Zendikar battle lands. So we have the Prairie Stream. Notice that it does have the plain subtype. Prairie Stream, Sunken Hollow, Smoldering Marsh, Cinderglade, and Canopy Vista. Now these will enter the battlefield tapped unless we control 2 or more basic lands. And to let you know one more, with Croson Verge, the plain and the forest subtype, they can be sought out from the library by sacrificing Croson Verge and getting those lands onto the battlefield, hopefully untapped. And next up, to try to help with some fetching as well, we have the original come into play tapped ally colored quote-unquote fetch lands. Now each one of these are going to ETB tapped, which is why we were foreshadowing earlier how many different options we have for when a land comes into play tapped to untap it. This will act as your fetch land. It can search for a plains or an island, of course if it's floodplain, and therefore for Bad River, Rocky Tar Pit, Mountain Valley, and grasslands. They are slow fetch lands if we do not have the untap effect, but they will fetch out your battle lands that we have already talked about and some basics. And the last 10 lands in this build, they're all coming into play tapped, and they all offer one of 3 different colors. They are the Tri-lands: the Crumbling Necropolis, Arcane Sanctum, Frontier Biovac, Jungle Shrine, Mystic Monastery, the Opulent Palace, Nomad Outpass, Seaside Citadel, Savage Lands, and Sandstep Citadel. Now, each one of these 10 lands offer one of 3 different colors to tap, and they each come into play tapped, and we cannot search up these lands with any of the lands that we've already talked about. They're always going to ETB tapped unless we have one of our untapped effects, and they cannot be fetched. So that is the land base for Painbow. I will say, to the credit of Wizards, this is most likely the most diverse 5-color land base that you could probably put together with a bunch of lands that are not inordinately or extravagantly valuable. There will be more to discuss about this land base sometime in the future. And here are the rest of the contents of the Painbow pre-constructed deck. We have our super thick foil etched version of Jared Carthalion. I sense that that is a card that will never end up warping, especially with its foil status. And now we got our stack of tokens here. There's our all colors Kavoo. We got some of those. There's our humans, and we have our snakes. We're going to flip those over to see our hydras. They included the Zaxara Hydra tokens, but we have no way of using them. We have an egg token for Atla Palani, some more snakes, and of course some bears. Why not? Beast token for our Beast Within. There's our wonderful Sarah Angel in token form, and a popular Magic format card. And there you have it, MTG BC, the contents of the Painbow pre-constructed commander deck from Dominaria United. And of course, as I mentioned just a few moments ago when talking about the land base, this does offer a fantastic beginning blueprint for beginning to cultivate and grow a 5-color land base. Again, I don't recommend solely utilizing all of these lands unless you have better, more efficient options in your collection. This is a great starting point for developing a 5-color land base, and it is something that we're going to discuss in greater detail sometime in the future. For all intents and purposes, MTGBC, there you have Painbow 5-color commander deck. We opened it, we revealed it, we discussed it, and now it's time to upgrade it. Painbow is a 5-color deck that features a Wooburg theme that rewards its pilot with peripheral benefits secondary to Wooburg spells and effects. Keeping this dynamic in mind, and with the front-facing commander, Jared Carthalion, as the general, the following cards are some possible upgrades to the original deck list, each of which enhances the Wooburg theme of this build. Since this build is focusing on Wooburg spells and effects, upgrading the overall mana base is step number 1 of strengthening this deck.
Lands aside, Bloom Tender taps for WUBRG mana as long as you control a permanent of each color. Any 5-color creature accomplishes this feat. Gigantha, the Wellspring, is not dependent on any other permanents for its mana production, but it has a limitation. Its WUBRG mana can't be used to pay any generic mana costs. This is not problematic in a deck that wants to cast spells and activate abilities that cost 1 mana of each color. Speaking of 1 mana of each color, Ramos Dragon Engine is a powerful upgrade to this build. It is a colorless creature, but whenever you cast a spell, you put a +1/+1 counter on Ramos for each of that spell's colors. You can remove 5 +1/+1 counters from Ramos and add double WUBRG mana to your mana pool. This ability can only be activated once per turn. With Ramos on your side of the battlefield, casting 1 WUBRG spell puts 5 +1/+1 counters on it, which then can be removed to generate 2 times the mana needed to cast the original spell, which is a 2-to-1 return on the mana invested. Speaking of WUBRG spells, let's add Chromat. Its host of activated abilities ensures that you always have an outlet into which you can sink your mana. Garth One-Eye has activated abilities ranging from spot removal and creature summoning to card draw and creating Black Lotuses. Although it costs twice the mana as our previous 2 5-color creature spells, Progenitus is easy to cast in a dedicated 5-color deck, can be ramped out way ahead of curve, and its protection from everything provides staying power on the battlefield. For the purposes of enhancing your 5-color creatures, include Scion of Draco. With mindful and strategic land-based construction, Draco should only cost 2 generic mana, and it gives your 5-color creatures Vigilance, Hexproof, Lifelink, First Strike, and Trample. Giving Progenitus Vigilance and Lifelink only causes your opponents to suffer more. For another mana sink, add Najeela the Blade Blossom. Her WUBRG activated ability untaps all attacking creatures. They gain Trample, Lifelink, and Haste until end of turn. After this phase, there is an additional combat phase, and we can activate this ability only during combat. Najeela does not tap in order to activate this ability, so it can be activated multiple times during combat, another feat easily accomplished in this type of build. Once more, Progenitus approves. Finally, a couple of cards to enhance this WUBRG theme. Uncage the Menagerie is a mono-green spell, but it can serve you very well. By paying 5 for X, you search your library for 5 creature cards with mana values of 5 and put them into your hand. This sorcery puts 5 of your WUBRG creature spells directly into your hand from your library, and all for the investment of just 7 mana. In a deck that is sculpted to produce a big-time WUBRG mana amount, including Uncage the Menagerie provides a great number of options for your hand. Lastly, is there a WUBRG-specific card more fun to cast than Last Stand? With multiple land-type options such as dual lands, triomes, and shocklands, casting Last Stand can provide an obscene amount of value. Target opponent loses 2 life for each swamp you control, deal damage to target creature equal to the number of mountains you control, create a 1/1 green sapperling creature token for each forest you control, gain 2 life for each plains you control, and draw a card for each island you control, and then discard a card for each card drawn this way. For even more sheer power, add Prismatic Omen to the deck for ultimate color fixing, and for the biggest bang for your Last Stand buck. The Painbow Precon deck, only Magic's second ever 5-color preconstructed EDH deck, showcases a 5-color matters theme in addition to featuring some peripheral 5-color payoffs. There is design space in this deck allowing for variations to the WUBRG archetype presented, in addition to ways to enhance it. From a playability standpoint, a diverse land base is imperative for the purposes of confidently piloting a 5-color build, particularly one whose focus is casting 5-color spells and activating WUBRG effects. Thank you for choosing MTG Burgeoning for your Magic the Gathering content. Give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video and consider becoming a subscriber. Doing so supports the channel and makes you eligible for our various subscriber rewards series. If you would like to support the channel further, then click the link to our Patreon page in the description below. There, you can join our ongoing Pack Wars series as a 1-month supporter or ongoing member. Or try joining Pack Wars for free by commenting on every MTG Burgeoning video in a month. We strive to offer creative rewards through our various Patreon tiers. So if Pack Wars isn't for you, then something else will be. Links to our content and various subscriber reward series can be found in the description below. Send us an email, follow us on Twitter, follow us on Instagram. We are your channel for all things Magic.